All right, what in the world is going on in the market, right? I told you I filmed part one, and this is part two. We actually delayed this a few days because a couple more things changed in the marketplace, and we wanted to be as accurate and as timely as we could possibly be on this. And so in part two of this, I'm going to talk about exactly what's going on in the Salt Lake and Utah County real estate markets. You know, everything I do is super hyper local. I'm not going to talk about what's going on in Box Elder. I'm not going to talk about what's going on in Florida. The things that matter to me and to my clients are what's happening here in Salt Lake metro area, Utah County, Tooele County, Davis County at the most. So massive, big changes, unprecedented changes in the market. I'm not a sky is falling kind of guy. I'm not a panic kind of guy. But I do see some indicators in the market that really concern me about my clients' investments and their future over the next year or two. And I have to talk about it. And the things I'm going to talk about here are not super popular. They're not the things that are going to be talked about by the National Association of Realtors and by the article writers at Zillow and all the people that have an interest in continuing to prop up the real estate market and instill confidence. I think that's great. Having confidence is great, but I also think you need all the data. And my job is to give you the data, not make the decision for you. I tell my clients this all the time. My job is you're the boss. You make the decision. My job is to get you the data so you can make the best decision for you. And that's what I'm going to do here in this quick video. So here's a question for you. Is it possible that we're going to see a correction in our marketplace that could wipe out most or all of the gains we've seen in the last couple of years? And the answer to that question is, yeah, it's really possible. And I'm going to explain why. So in this video, I'm looking at my other screen here just so I can stay on track. I'm going to use I just completed a white paper that I have been sending to most of my investor clients, telling them, hey, these are the key indicators in the market. These are the KPIs I'm looking at. This is what the charts look like. This is what I think based on history is going to happen. And this is the probability of it happening. And nothing's 100%. So I want to tell you this right up front. Nobody has a crystal ball. Nobody knows 100% for sure what's going to happen. I'm giving what I'm telling you in this video an odds of maybe 80, 85% happening. The reason it's not 100% is that we have seen in the last few years the government's ability to come in and quantitatively ease and change the marketplace and change the game for markets as a whole. So as an example, in 2019, we had more loans in default than we had in 2007 and 8. Right? We had a higher percentage, meaning in 2007 and 8, there were typical default rates, just so you know, were in the 1.5% range. Right before the big crash in 2008, we had like 4.3% loans in default. In the end of 2019, we were over 5.3% loans in default. So me and all my investor friends and my partners were saying, we have this wave of foreclosures that's about to run over us. And it would have if the pandemic hadn't popped in and the government had done some quantitative easing to make that transition into that odd pandemic marketplace smoother, which was good. They should have done that. I think they should have done that. They put eviction moratoriums on, foreclosure moratoriums on. They started printing money like it was worth nothing, because it is. And all those things combined created an environment where we kept rates artificially low. We propped up the economy using quantitative easing strategy from the Fed and from the federal government. So all those things combined just kind of kicked the can down the road a little bit, right? And if you've ever watched any kind of a market swing, you know that if the pendulum swings far one direction, it's going to have to swing far back the other direction too. It's just the natural law of the economy. And it's possible that if it's artificially swung too far one way, it could be artificially swung too far back the other way too. So I wrote this white paper. It's not meant to be a sky is falling kind of white paper, but I am talking about some very specific predictions that I have that I feel comfortable enough that I'm putting myself out on a limb to give to you. So if you want that, the link to the PDF or the online version of that white paper is down below in the comments, so feel free to link to that. And if you have any questions or comments, obviously you can DM me, call me, text me, send me smoke signals, whatever you got to do to get in touch. So what I'm doing here is I'm calling for what I think is going to be a correction in the real estate marketplace for Salt Lake County, Utah County, Davis, Tooele counties that could be in the 22 to 28% range. Now, some of the key indicators that I see are even more extreme than that. And some of the experts are saying, no, Utah's economy is going to be propped up by strong jobs. I'll address that in a minute. And we're only going to see a 4, 5, 6, 10% decrease. So my experience, since I've been through a few of these changes, right, since 1987, I've been through these bubbles and pops and swings in the marketplace that used to happen every 10 years or so. The truth is usually somewhere in the middle. The reality of what ends up happening is somewhere in the middle. So I'm not going to get too far to the extremes. I'm not going to tell you, yeah, I think the market's fine. Go ahead, do whatever you're going to do, act as normal, because I'm out on the front lines as an agent, and I can tell you right now, things have shifted. And any agent that tells you hasn't, doesn't have listings, doesn't have any clients out in the marketplace right now, and they're not sensing it. But any of us that do have a significant number of listings and they are priced right, and we're seeing what's going on with the activity of those, I'm telling you right now, we're seeing the change live, and that won't be represented in the data for another month or so, maybe 2 or 3 weeks to a month or so. You're going to start to see some of that data change. When that happens, the snowball is going to pick up some pace, and I think it's a little bit of, unfortunately, maybe a little bit of hysteria is going to kind of come into play. So we just got to be careful, not panic, not have any hysteria, just make good decisions that are based in some kind of economic science. So I'm predicting that after this summer selling season, meaning we're almost in July now, when July happens toward the beginning of August, that when the heat from that market dies down a little bit and some of those buyers retreat back into wait and see mode, that we're going to start to see some major changes in the marketplace. So I'm telling my clients, if you're going to sell your home in the next this is a spoiler alert, if you're going to sell your home in the next 2 or 3 years, now would be the time to do it. Whether you do it with me, you do it on your own, you do it with another agent, I don't care. Right now is probably the time to do that if you're planning on selling, because I think there's a real potential we're going to have a 22 to 28% correction in the marketplace that should bottom out based on the data I have sometime in mid-2023, maybe right before the 2023 selling season in summer. And then it will start to climb its way back up slowly. It's not going to climb its way back up with the same veracity that it came down. Okay, so let's just talk about what happened here. Look at this data really quickly. Current relevant statistics. This is the first thing that caught my eye and made me think, okay, something's going on. We got to look at this. I looked at year over year, and I know that 2021 is not a great year to compare to because it was wild and crazy. But there is something that's important in this data that I want to share with you. Okay, I want you to look at this data really quickly from June. This is important. Now, this is kind of the first thing that triggered me a little bit and made me think, okay, this is something we got to start looking at. If you're going to notice this, so I took a random date in June. I used the board's data, and I made sure that it was a weekday and nothing crazy was happening. And I want you to notice something. The prevailing thought on this market was that we have a supply and demand issue, that supply is so down and demand is so high that's what's driving these price increases, right? So the idea would be if you were able to cure the supply issue, if you were able to raise supply, then you'd also be able to increase, what the demand capacity for that, and they'd be able to go and swipe up those homes. Well, I want you to look at this really quickly. We put, year over year, we put more than double the number of homes on the market. We went up 230%. So we more than doubled the number of homes that were available in the market. But you would think if the supply-demand issue was really the issue, that then we would have had an increase in sales too. The reality of that is we actually went down in the number of properties under contract that we have. So the reason that's so important is that when supply increases and demand stays the same or demand decreases, then the other thing that has to give, the other energy that has to switch in that process is the economic part of price and terms, right? Those are the things that have to change. So that's the thing that started me worried a little bit, saying, okay, wait a minute, our prices have increased significantly. Supply has more than doubled, but obviously demand didn't follow it because it would have doubled as well. So I use another term called capacity of demand, which means, I'll talk about this here more in just a minute, but what it really means is the idea of market value for a home is a ready, willing, and able buyer, meaning with a ready, willing, and able seller, neither one of them under duress, that come together and agree on the price of a home, right? Ready, willing, able. So here's the thing. We have tons of buyers that are ready, and we have tons of buyers that are able. My loan officer has 60 or 70 pre-qualified buyers just waiting for the ability to buy the house that they want to buy. So the capacity of demand to me is more about the able to buy, because rates have shot up so fast, and you can see in this document right here that in 21 it spent most of the year under 3%. We were able to go get interest rates all the time at 2.78, 2.98%. 3% was a great rate. 3.5% was a great rate. But what happened between December of last year, which is January of this year, and June of this year, is the Fed raised the base interest rate so much that it had an effect on mortgage rates as well. And those mortgage rates, even though the mortgages are really more tied into the Treasury, when the Fed raises the base or prime rate, it does price back into the real estate market. So you add inflation and you add all the other things that are going on in our marketplace right now, and what you end up with is a really significantly reduced capacity of demand. So interest rates have gone from, you're going to notice in this white paper I have that we've got experts out there that were saying Fannie Mae thought that we could get all the way up to 3.3% by the end of 2022. Are you kidding me? We passed 3.3% in January of 2022. Experts were saying, man, if we hit the 4% mark, it's going to have a major impact in real estate. Well, we're over 6. So, of course, it had a major impact in real estate. This is a screenshot from a video I did here a little back. You can go back and look at it. I'll link to it. But here's what's really incredible to me. So as I started looking at, this is my favorite graph, my favorite real estate trend chart of all time. If we're going into a city in the Midwest and we're going to buy a bunch of flips or buy a bunch of investment properties, this is one of the main graphs we look at, which is home prices that are adjusted for inflation, and it comes from Case-Shiller. So I've got 100 plus years of history on Case-Shiller that we can look at. But I want you to look at this really quickly. Notice up here in 2003, right before the bubble, right before the big recession, this is how far out of whack our prices were with regards to inflation. This is how overpriced the properties were regarding inflation. And look where it dropped down to. It dropped down right to that basic trend. Well, we have the exact same problem, only worse right now. The market prices are priced so far out of whack that we're actually way more over inflated than we were before that 2008 bubble. Now, you're going to hear people say, yes, but the underlying causes are different. I get that. The underlying cause that created an overinflation issue in 2006, 7, and 8 was predatory and ease lending restrictions. It made it too easy to get money, right? And so we had 4.5 something percent default rates on mortgages. Well, artificially low interest rates had the exact same effect. They made access to money a lot easier. The only difference was the payments were a lot less, so people were able to afford those. And in addition to that, the government was printing money and giving money away, so people felt even a little easier in the process of buying those and eating those payments. So what I look at in this chart is a little scary to me, but we would need to retreat down to the high 400s as an average price. Right now, our average price is 630 something. We would need to reduce down to the high 400s in order for this graph to fall down as much as it fell. And it corrects every single time. I want you to look at every spike on that graph. It corrects. There's one time in 1940 when the access to money and the lending regulations changed completely, that homes became valued at what we call a mean rate. So since that time, every major move has had a correction. If you think this move is not going to have a correction, you're crazy in my mind, because it's going to. It just has to. And I want you to use just a little common sense too. We'll talk about common sense. This is another key indicator that I look at that tells me something's not right. And again, it's something that we look at carefully when we go into another market to decide whether we want to invest in a market or not, which is we look at the ratio between the median income in that city or that state and the average price in that city or that state, depending on what we're looking at. So if you know anything about mortgages, you know that there's a front ratio. The bank looks and says, okay, your monthly mortgage payment can't be more than 30 whatever percent, 31, 34, depending on the loan, 36% of your income. They do that because they know that if you get above that, the likelihood you're going to default is going to be bad. It's going to be too much for you to bite off, so they don't loan you any more than that. In 2008, the median income was $59,000. The average price was $258,000. So that made the ratio between median income and home prices, a little high, but sustainable 4.3. If you look at the graph on this number, it's always been in that 4 or 5% range because we have multiple incomes, right, in the average home. In 2022, a few days ago, the number was a 10.5x difference between the median house price and the amount of income somebody's making. So $626,000, the median income did not rise that much over that period of time. And again, we're adjusting for inflation here. And it's 10.5x. That tells me something has to shift. What this is saying is it's not sustainable. There's just no way the average person can buy the average home. And if you get into a situation in an economy where the average person can't buy the average home, you have a problem that's going to correct. It has to correct. It's going to correct in one of many different ways. It might correct in a shift in the housing market to move way into lower income, high density property. But in a place like Salt Lake, where we have so much ground, in Utah County, we have so much ground. Yeah, you see, we are building a ton of apartments and townhouses and condos, but those aren't high density, cheap places to live. Those townhouses are averaging $500,000, $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 too. So it's really no different. It's just more about how to enrich the builders and how many pieces of property, how many individual tax ID numbers they can put on one piece of ground. So I always think about common sense. Like, just think about this. If the average person can't buy the average house, it's a problem. If quantitative easing means we're going to print tons and tons of free money, that tons and tons of free money is going to have some kind of an economic effect as we kick that can down the road a little bit. And you're seeing that right now. That's what led to all this crazy record inflation that we're having, is all the free money, quote unquote free money, that the government printed and handed out over the last couple of years, and the quantitative easing in terms of the foreclosure moratoriums, the eviction moratoriums, and the other, and artificially keeping interest rates low. Those things just kick that down. Now, historically, when the stock market, when interest rates raise, the stock market drops. You can see that over and over and over. So anytime rates go up, the stock market's going to go down. It's just kind of one of those constants. So if rates are down, like they have been over the last several years, the stock market's hitting these record numbers in the mid 30,000s. Rates go up to 6 or 7%. You're seeing stocks drop right now. Like, it's a surprise to everybody, but we've known that strategy, and we knew. That's why I have nothing in stocks right now, very little, because we knew the Fed was planning on raising interest rates, do some quantitative tightening. As soon as that happened, the stock market was going to crash. So you see these big tech companies that are down 40, 50, 60%. It wasn't a surprise to anybody. It shouldn't have been a surprise to anybody. And then the other thing is, yes, even though supply has increased, the ability for buyers to actually complete a purchase has been significantly reduced, because the cost of buying a home has gone up 200%. The cost of home ownership for the same home has gone up 200% since this last crash we had. So let's talk for a second about, do interest rates really affect the local market? Like, okay, the interest rates are a big national federal move, right? But what is the real hyper-local change in our marketplace that makes a difference? So this graph, we talked about this for just a minute, and it's only the difference between 5 and 6.25%. If you want to get really crazy, I want you to think about what really happened in our market. This is an analysis that I did on our market, and I'm saying if buyer A was going to buy a home in January, and he wanted to buy, or she wanted to buy, the average home in Salt Lake, the average home price in Salt Lake in January was $588,117. The interest rate they could have got in early January was 2.8, or just around 2.8%. So their payment would have been $2,627 a month. That's still pretty high, but it's doable. But let's say that buyer waited until May or June 22 to purchase. Well, look at this. First of all, the average house price went up from $588 to $623. So the exact same house now, same square footage, same location, same area, rose 6% in appreciation. But now the interest rate, again, here at the peak in June, and by the way, it's going to go up again in July. They're indicating that they're going to raise another half a percent or so in July. But let's just take 6 points and some change. That payment now for the exact same home is $3,969 a month. It was $2,627, now it's $3,969. The difference on that, think about that for just a minute. The difference on the payment is $1,342 a month for the exact same home if you'd have waited 6 months to be able to buy. So the biggest issue is this: even if the buyer could make the additional payment, the reality of that is he or she would have to have an additional 52 or 50, what is it, $52,000 a year in income just to be able to qualify for it. So even if they felt like they could manage it, that payment, they still have to have to qualify for that, which is going to require an increase in their income of $52,000 a year. Now you and I know both. Most people buy homes based on payment. Most people don't go in and say, "All right, it's $628,000. That's a good deal." They buy the home based on what they can afford in a payment, what they'll qualify for. So what that means is that if the average price of a home between those two markets went from 588 to 623, the average person now can't afford any longer that, because they can't afford that other home. If they were to go get a 6.2 or a 6.1% interest rate on a home that they wanted to buy, instead of looking at that 623 range, if they could only qualify for 26, 27, they're going to be looking in the high fours again, which is another reason why I think that the indicators are telling us that this market's going to drop 22, 25, 28% back into the high fours, because that's what people qualify for. In your experience, did anybody have a dramatic increase in their income, $52,000 a year increase in their income on the average during that time? No, the median income is pretty close to what it was before. There's even some more things going on in the Silicon Slopes job market that I'll tell you that make me think, again, that even though we have a great job market and a great economy in Utah, by and large, the job market's not going to sustain us and not going to keep us propped up the way that a lot of people say that it is. So I talked before about capacity of demand. I think this is the most important thing to think about right now. Is there's a lot of people that have to sell their home. Those people are going to they're going to compete for the number of buyers that are in the home. They're in the marketplace right now. They're going to go compete for them. They can compete with them with price and condition. That's the only two things they can compete with, or some terms. And that's one thing that we're seeing right now is that there's a lot more terms being available. Seller financing, lease option, sellers willing to pay closing costs, sellers willing to buy the rate down. Those things are creeping into the market. Massive price reductions happening right now because people that have to sell their homes are getting more and more competitive for the few buyers that are left in the marketplace. So when supplies are reduced like that and volume dropped down, then you're no longer going to see the number of sales that you had seen in the months or the years before that, because the capacity of demand is so much lower because people are just restricted in the amount of payment that they can qualify for. So I really think that the capacity of demand is the number one issue we're dealing with right now. And that brings me to the question, how far could this market drop? If you think about what's happened in the marketplace, if you look at wages, median income versus purchase price, if you look at this trend for inflation, if you look at the trend for unemployment, if you look at the trend, because unemployment's down, unemployment's strong right now. If you look at the relevant interest rates and lending regulations that are happening, if you go look at the number of loan applications that are happening, signaling right now that we have a massive reduction in potential buyers in the marketplace. If you look at the number of loan applications that are happening, it's down historically significantly. And lastly, if you think about what's possible for the government to intervene, what tools the government has that they could utilize to intervene to quantitatively ease and correct this market, you're going to find that there isn't anything else that they can do. They can control lending practices, which they're not going to do based on what happened in 2008. They can control interest rates to try and curb inflation. So let me explain what the government's doing right now. The reason the government is raising interest rates so fast and so furious is they feel like the inflation is running out of control at 8, 9, 10% in some cases. Gas prices in some places are, where we live here in Salt Lake, it's over $5 a gallon consistently. In some places in the country, it's $9 and $10 a gallon consistently. So the thing that matters in that is that in order to bring all those things back down to normal, in order to bring those things back into some relevant, plausibly doable real estate economy, the market's going to have to make a correction. The government's not going to do it with rates. The government's not going to do it with income and loan forgiveness. All of these forbearances and all of the evictions and all those things are playing themselves out right now. We still have even with all this appreciation, oddly enough, we still have a relatively high, above normal loan default percentage rate right now, which is wild to me. Why anybody would let their home they know they have equity in it. Why anybody would let their home get foreclosed on is just beyond my comprehension. But I just want you to look at this. I think for this market to return, we're higher now than we were in 2008. For it to return down and make a similar move. I don't think it'll drop all the way down below that median line, but I honestly think we're going to get somewhere into that 455 to upper 400s price range. That's going to be the average, which is going to be significant, which means if you own $1 million house right now, it's very likely that value of that house is going to drop into the 750s or the 780s or 790s or 800s, something like that, before it starts to climb its way back out and make the correction. And I want you to look at how long that correction took. I mean, it took a couple years for the market to drop, right? 2 or 3 years, but starting, in 2011, 2012, it started to build its way back up, and it got really crazy here over the last few years. This market would not have happened the way that it did had interest rates not been artificially kept low and had all that money been flushed into the economy the way that they did. So if you're selling a property now, there's a few things that matter, and that's kind of the point of this video, right? Is you've got to be strategic in your pricing. You've got to be strategic and focus more on what's available in the buyer competition than just putting a price on a house and hoping that it sells. Those days are done. The idea of it's really rare anymore that we run into a multiple offer situation, except on flips and some really low price properties that are selling for cash. We almost never run into multiple offer situations anymore. And that changed like that. I mean, from March, where we had deals in early April where we were getting 5, 10 offers at a time, to June, where now those same properties can't even get showings, let alone get offers. The market has substantially and fundamentally changed, and we got to adapt to it. You need to expect a longer listing time. I think you're going to find right now that, where we were in a 4, 5, 6, 7 day average time on the market, right now we're in like 15 to 18. That's going to move into 25 to 30, which is still a seller's market, still a good market to be in. That's fine. But you're going to have to compete for those available buyers. Your agent, no matter who you hire, has to be super hyper targeted in their in the way that they go about finding those potential buyers. You can't put a sign in the front yard, put it on the MLS, and hope it's going to sell. You have to be really aggressive in your marketing to go find those potential buyers. Your agent does, or if you're selling it on your own. You need to make sure that your expectations for what your sales price are going to be and what your market time is going to be is realistic, that you don't panic. This is not a time to panic. I do think we're going to have a correction. I don't think it's going to happen in one day. I think if you have a home that you've got to sell, now's the time. And I actually think it's a huge opportunity for people right now. That's why I'm telling my investors with this white paper to get busy, is I think there's the ability right now, based on the market, for you to go and sell a property and still get a decent price on your property. And I'm talking about a price that's inflated above where it would have been if the market had continued normally over 2020 and 2021. You're still going to get more than that normal inflation, and you're going to do well. But because the market has shifted a little bit, I think there's some buying opportunities out there right now where you're not competing with 62 other buyers, especially if you have a little bit of money. You have the ability to go in and buy something, buy it right, and get a little bit of a deal on it right now. So I think it's actually a cool prime marketplace for you. And you got to have a pro. At the end of the day, if you've lived through a few of these markets, any of the agents that have been around, I got licensed originally in 1987. If you've been around a little bit, you've seen these markets come, you've seen them go. It's just an adaptation and strategy. The only difference is there's no panic. The real estate market's not going to fail. Everything's going to be good. It's not Enron. It's not going to zero. You're going to be fine. The key is you just have to change the strategy, and you have to adapt a little bit. You need a pro that can hold your hand, walk you through all that, make sure that you're thinking about things the right way, and make sure you're making the right decisions. So bottom line prediction, I think that sometime in August and maybe September, we're going to start to see a slide in the marketplace. I think that slide will continue very likely through mid-2023 and maybe beyond that. I think the summer selling season 2023, we're going to find some deals because property values will have dropped a little bit. There's going to be more properties on the market. Supply will be up. I actually think rates will decline a little bit. Even if the Fed comes in July and raises rates again, I think that the market has kind of priced some of those things in now. And I actually think that once we get used to this, 5-6% rate a little bit, then it's going to become a little bit of the norm. The last few weeks have just kind of been a shock and awe for everybody in the marketplace, and everybody's on their heels. I likened it in our sales meeting in office the other day to, you remember in March of 2020 when we had that earthquake? Well, when you're in an earthquake, it only lasted a few seconds, but you just are holding on. You're like, man, what's going on here? I've got to protect my kids, got to protect my wife, everybody get under the table or whatever you got to do, get in a doorway. But you're just kind of on your heels, making sure that nobody's getting hurt. And then when it stops, then you're kind of assessing the damage and you pause a little bit. And One of my mentors and one of my best friends, Peter Solaris, was saying the other day, as an investor, what we do is we're in the fast lane. We've been in the fast lane buying like crazy. And then we see a crash up ahead. We see some lights. We see some warning signs. So we're going to start to get over. And it's in the left lane. We put the blinker on and we start to, move over into the middle. And we're not over into the breakdown lane yet where we're at a full pause in a traffic jam. But we're heading that direction. We're being very careful about the stuff we buy right now. We're being very careful about the situations we get ourselves into, because if this market drops quicker than we think it's going to drop, then we're going to get hurt. And that's the same thing that we're telling all of our investor clients. So, okay, that was a long video, but I've been promising this for a little while, so I'm not going to overproduce it. Bottom line is, I think if you're going to sell, you should likely sell sometime this summer before the end of the season. You've got part of June, all of July, part of August. Get out there, price it right. Use some strategies to attract the right buyers. Engage the other agents. Make sure you have a good strategy in place on price and terms. Be smart about concessions you're offering to the buyer to maybe buy down their rate a little bit. Talk to me about that. That's one thing we're seeing right now that's working really, really well. And it's going to be fine. Look at, if it drops to 455 or 500 or 525 or 5, it'll be fine. It'll work its way back up. Real estate's still the best game on the planet. I'd still way rather, my dad taught me when I was young, I'd way rather have my money in real estate because it's bricks and dirt. Everybody's always going to need a place to live. You're always going to have something to do with that. If you buy crypto, if you buy stock, that's fine. That's your thing. But those things can go to zero. They can go all the way to zero. Real estate's never going to go all the way to zero. So you got to think about it long term. You got to have long tail. If you're doing anything short term right now, now's the time to make a move. But real estate still always and always will be the best place to park your money. In my biased opinion, right? Okay, if you have any questions about it, DM me, hit the subscribe button, ask me questions, hit the notification bell so you see when we're putting up new content. We really try hard to put up decent, relevant content that can coach you in the marketplace. I'd love it if you called me and wanted to use my services, but if you have a great agent, call them, get going, make sure you protect yourself. And if you or your agent have any questions about why I'm seeing what I'm seeing in the market, please download this white paper or feel free to give me a call and I'll answer anything I can. No drama. And just trying to help out. Okay, you guys, great to see you. Hope to see you again here in another video in a few days when we get this one produced. The next video out Thursday. Thanks so much. Talk to you soon. Bye.